Jedd Fisch's staff is putting in work on the recruiting trail. There are 3 top 100 visitors that have scheduled officials to Montlake.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies and Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make of your moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Lars, we're going to have a lot of fun today because we've talked a lot about Jedd Fisch on the recruiting trail and how we've been impressed with what he's done early on. And then the last week, he goes out and he secures official visits with 3 top 100 players in the 247 database. That's cornerback Dijon Lee, that's linebacker Matai Tagoa'i, I believe is how you say that one, and safety Anquon Fegans. And which, I'll just give you the floor. Which one do you want to go ahead and start with?
I think, it's kind of the one that we've known the most about, and that's Dijon Lee, because it's the one that the staff has kind of had if you rank all 3, which one have they had the biggest head start with? It's Dijon Lee, because when we talked about his top 6, 7, 8, whatever it was, Arizona and Washington were both among that list. And when we talked about Washington's recruiting last year, that's more of a testament to maybe Courtney Morgan and the program. John Richardson, we've seen how much of a recruiter and developer and kind of just relationship guy he is. There's clearly a closer relationship. I think that would be one of those cases where if Dijon Lee picked Washington and Kalen DeBoer never left, you're picking the school over the relationship. This is one where now that you have the relationship and the school at the same place, there's no reason not to have Dijon Lee be a Husky. And that's how you get back to the DVU. And then when you're going to talk, you can pick one of the other 2 safeties. But that in order to have a true solid secondary, it can't just be the corners. You got to have a mixture of both. But having that true outside lockdown corner separates you and makes the safety life a lot easier.
I agree with you there. And then when you go and you look at just kind of the way this whole process is played out, we're going to talk a little bit more about his rescheduling a little bit later on in the show. But it's really interesting to see, obviously now Alabama has gotten an official visit from him because he likes his relationship with Kalen DeBoer, Courtney Morgan, and all them. But he really does seem sold on Washington. And when it was that he was going to take his final official visit to UW, that seemed like a really good sign. Still seems like a good sign for a couple reasons we're going to get to with when he's taking his visit. But that's something where you're right. Everything is there. He loves talking to John Richardson. He's cited that that's probably the person that he's closest with. And then on top of that, Jedd Fisch's staff recruited him really, really hard. And that was the reason that Arizona stayed in the race over, at the time, Alabama and others, because he liked his relationship with that staff so much. So it's kind of become the perfect storm for him here on Montlake. And then let's move over to the next one where, you would say you're still a little surprised that a player of this caliber is visiting. Just, you're able to secure him so early when it didn't seem like there was much of a relationship there going forward. And that's one spot has him listed as a safety, one has him listed as a linebacker. Looks like he'll probably play inside linebacker. And that's Matai Tagoa'i from San Clemente High School in California, where I have a couple takes that I'm going to throw out on this show. My first one is, of the 3 guys that we're going to talk about over the course of this first segment, I think I like his film the best, where his explosiveness, just his aggressiveness as a tackler, getting downhill, blitzing, doing everything that he does from an outside linebacker spot, inside linebacker, dropping into coverage, everything that it is that he does, he's such an impressive athlete, and his frame can easily carry, I would say, 215, 220, 225, where, you're comfortable with him playing linebacker in this day and age, where you don't need him to get all the way to 235, 240 to say, all right, now we want you to play inside. So I really like everything that he shows on film. And it looks like Washington's in a really good spot with him, where the 2 visits he's got right now are with Washington and with Utah. And Robert Bala, the new linebackers coach who came over from Alabama, was able to secure this visit rather quickly. And it just kind of shows that he checked all the boxes that Jedd Fisch was looking for while he was on the coaching the coaching trail search, is what I'll say. And then he got all those things in Robert Bala from what it looks like.
Exactly. And I think, and that's kind of the key with all 3 of these visitors, where in theory, you could take all three, right? This isn't okay, you have
Absolutely.
a corner, safeties. I was like, I just wanted to clarify that because as I presented it, sometimes they're both listed as safeties, but to your point, I can kind of play more of that linebacker role, and then have Fegans be a true safety. And I think that's where the one, if you had to probably rank him in order, Lee arguably most
Lee's still
likely,
the most important.
but also I'm saying most likely to get probably
Yeah.
Tagoa'i and Lee are kind of 1A, 1B, and then Fegans is more 2A or like just a solid 2, where it's like coming from Alabama, Robert Bala might be able to help a little bit as a former Alabama coach, which I'm saying there might be some in-state recruiting potential there that they at least might have gotten to shake hands, or at least he knows the school, knows the area, can kind of be an assistant recruiter in that sense. But also, we've seen John Richardson and Armand Hawkins already fly down to Alabama and Georgia and offer a number of kids.
Yeah.
So I think they're comfortable going down there as well. It's just a matter of, will the distance be too hard? Can you beat out some SEC schools? But the fact that you're already getting him to take an official visit coming from the state of Alabama, I think is an important mark just already for Jedd Fisch to say, hey, we already know that California, the West Coast, Hawaii, that's going to be obviously primarily where we're going, right? Maybe a little bit in the Midwest and Texas, just because playing in the Big Ten, you want to get some kids from Texas, but we're still going to also nationally recruit. We're still, if there's a kid, was it Vines-Bright?
Raiden Vines-Bright. Yeah.
Raiden Vines-Bright, where it's he's was on the West Coast, now he's going to IMG in Florida. Even though he's not a true Florida recruit, you're still recruiting those kids and making the effort to recruit nationally for the players that you've identified. You're not going to be like Oregon and throw out 150 offers to kids on the East Coast, but you're still going to at least make those inroads when you have the opportunity. And I think that's what it comes down to, the relationships that John Richardson is able to build. And then this key selling point, you tie this all together, is all you guys are going to be coached and play for Steve Belichick, who's going to be your defensive play caller.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the selling point. It's like, okay, like, well, Belichick is calling my plays, so he probably knows what he's doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
fair chance. Again, he's not Bill, but clearly he's been in the building long enough. And one thing, when I talked to Carson Bruner before the linebackers coach was hired, after Steve Belichick had been announced, was he actually asked him about that, where he said, how did you handle coaching under your dad? Because obviously, like, everybody would know the tie-in. He's like, it's like he's really his own person. Like, he's still obviously, like, there's some semblance of Bill there, and he didn't say like, oh, I'm going to be the anti-Bill. It's like, no, he's still very much his father's son, but there's just a little bit different, where it's like his personality will shine. I think being a younger guy, players will be able to relate to him, and I think that's why having an NFL background is going to be able to make that all kind of be the key sticking point when you bring in, hey, John Richardson's your position coach, Vinny Cesare is your position coach, and you guys are going to be having plays called by Steve Belichick. Like, if you're a defensive player, that doesn't get much better.
You're absolutely right there. A couple of things when it comes to Fegans. Yeah, he goes to Thompson High School in Alabama, where it does sound right now where shout out to our buddy Zach Blackerby over with Locked On Auburn, where it does sound like Auburn's in the lead for him. But right now, the 3 official visits he has set up are with Clemson, Georgia, and Washington. And he's coming at that on that big visit weekend that the Huskies are trying to set up for the end of June. But one of the key distinctions that you want to make about Anquon Fegans right now is his brother Traquan. He committed to Alabama out of high school, goes to USC now. He transferred to USC in the fall of last year. So it doesn't seem like distance is necessarily a problem in his family. So maybe that's one reason he's interested in coming out here. But just seeing that is really can't be said as much more as a big notch in Jedd Fisch's coaching staff's belt, where it's, they're putting in the work. They're going all over the country. And the one position where I'm really interested to see moving forward with that is defensive tackle, where they haven't really thrown out a lot of offers on the West Coast in general, some of those guys. But that's where, if you can go get a visit like this, I can't say I'm concerned about, them potentially having to go into Kansas or Oklahoma to go try to get a defensive tackle or two at this point, where it just doesn't look like the strongest class all around at that position. And Lars, with that being said, let's switch gears here from 2025. Let's talk about 2024 for a minute. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. You can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And shout out to the Celtics, man. They just keep winning and winning and winning. Love seeing that big win in Madison Square Garden on Saturday night. And they're I think they might be the official NBA team of Locked On Huskies as we go into the NBA postseason and everything. And, when we talk recruiting, we got to talk about our friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is a tool to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the hiring process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, Lars, there's some crystal balls rolling in for a couple late additions to Washington's class. And I mean, I don't know if it should come as a surprise to Husky fans that both of these guys are part of Jedd Fisch's recruiting class at Arizona. And that would be tight end Charlie Crowell, who's a 3-star recruit out of Summit in Oregon, and then Michael Watkins, another 3-star recruit out of Apollo High School in Arizona. Let's start with Charlie Crowell, where, it seemed like he was, after he was released from his NLI last week, he got a Washington offer rather quickly. You look at the state of the room, and much like we'll get to with Watkins and the offensive line as well, and you just say, okay, yeah, this all seems to add up, and more. It almost feels like more of a matter of when, not if, at a certain point.
Right, exactly. And I think that's kind of the key. Is clearly, and I think I talked about it a couple of weeks ago on the show, where if you either enter the portal very early just to see what your options are, maybe you can jump back in, or very late. And both of those came rather late. And so it was one of those where, okay, you've kind of had a chance to meet both those guys that I'm assuming had a chance to meet the new staff and, kind of assess their own situation and then assess what they wanted to do after that. And I mean, and you look at both of their recruitments, they both committed around the same time in mid-June to Arizona. And so clearly both of the players identified by Arizona, Brennan Carroll, and the offensive line coach, and Jordan Power, the tight end coach, pretty early on. And so I think that's one of those where no matter what their rating is, because again, we much like PFF grades and everything, we can slant things how we want it, but as long as it fits the narrative. But even when it doesn't fit the narrative, it's one of those where, okay, to your point, right? You look at the depth, they're like, well, either way, you still need depth at the position. Neither of these additions prevent you from still making further additions in April, right? It's almost like, okay, we can maybe take one less tight end. We can take one less offensive line. We can take one less whatever. But that's kind of the point of why, okay, well, if these are guys we liked enough at Arizona and we look at the room we got now, well, okay, well, they're definitely worth being in this room. And now, I don't believe either one got an offer from Washington under the previous regime.
They didn't, no.
Now, again, that can kind of go both ways, right? Where the staff, they did offer some guys, but again, I don't think it was Kalen DeBoer's prowess to recruit. But Scott Huff, Scott Huff knows pretty well the offensive line, especially in the state of Arizona. But again, when you look at the room that Washington already had, there's a lot of different reasons. But it's not that it's a bad take when, again, you're getting identified by Brennan Carroll. It's, hey, you know what? You're a depth guy where if I kind of get a little more weight on you and in a couple of years we can kind of see what you fill out to, you just got to trust the process. It's almost kind of basically similar, just maybe a slightly younger Scott Huff, where it's, okay, there's some of these guys are going to be instant impact guys with 3 at the 4 stars and maybe a 5-star or 2, right? But then you want to get those 3 stars. I remember Coleman Shelton back in the day was a pretty low 3-star, but I think he certainly kind of came in, developed, got a couple of years under his system. Now he's playing in the NFL. So it's just because they're like, oh, wow, this is a mid 3-star take. It's like, well, those mid 3-stars also can become a lot more. I mean, look at Parker Brailsford was not a 4-star, I believe, coming out of SWAT.
You're correct, yeah. And so I like your point there. And when you look at Charlie Crowell, he's somebody who right now he looks like I kind of comp him to Will Dissly in terms of not only, just his play style, but in terms of, I bet, what Jordan Paopao would want his development to look like, where he's a good catcher. I wouldn't say that there's any one area when you look at his film and say this is an elite trait. That's an elite trait. But he has a lot of very good, solid to above average traits where it's okay. I see his athleticism. You can work with it in X, Y, and Z, and you can use him as a blocker. You can use him in certain ways. Our buddy Ben Glassmeyer, who writes over at Huskies Wire, had a really nice breakdown of him the other day, where one of the first things he said was, "I love the way he blocks. He's really nasty. He gets downhill with a lot of authority," and that's something where right now, when you look at Washington's other tight end commit in the 2024 class, or signee now who enrolled early in Decker DeGraff, where I like Decker as a blocker too, but Decker, I would say, is far superior at this point in their development as a pass catcher and a route runner compared to what Charlie Crowell is, where you can use both those guys. Decker, from the way the room looks right now, might get a decent amount of run as a true freshman. And while Charlie, maybe you get a game from here, a game from there. You see what he's like as a blocker. Maybe you throw him a pass or two. But it's a really nice, just I would say a yin and a yang in terms of very different styles of players that can complement each other very well in this class.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that's kind of what you want, especially when, Jordan Paopao, when you look at the room of how thin it is, you want to kind of have a bit of both, right? You don't want
Yeah.
just, hey, maybe if you look at the room right now, you think Quentin Moore is probably the best blocking tight end, probably not the best pass catcher. Ryan Otten's kind of the question mark in the room just because he hasn't been able to, be on the field. But when go back and look at his high school tape, he was a little bit of both, right? So kind of can do both, but at his size, maybe he was more of a natural pass catcher. Then you bring in a kind of the next wave of that. You want to have a bit of both, right? And I think Jordan Paopao has proven that he's been able to develop a number of different body tight ends, right? When you look at Drew Sample, to Tanner McLaughlin, Hunter Bryant, even in between there. So now some of those guys might not have panned out, but the point being, it's like, well, he's still able to coach a number of different body types, a number of different style of tight ends. And then when you look at Jedd Fisch's offense, okay, well, it's clearly I forgot what he said in the press conference. But we want to do a multitude of different. No, it was Lance Zierlein making the point. Well, it's the scheme that kind of dictates it, not necessarily the talent. It's like
Right.
Jedd scheme guys open use multiple different types of tight ends. When you're going to the Big Ten, you want to think, okay, well, we need some kind of H-back tight ends just in goal line and things like that. But then we also want your split out tight end to kind of get those over the middle seam plays with Jeremiah Hunter going over the middle, going over the top, and Giles Jackson doing Giles Jackson things.
So I like where you're going there. I just want to make sure we take a minute or two to talk about Michael Watkins as well, where Apollo High School in Glendale is where another UW commit, Adam Muhammad, the running back, is also out of. So it's nice to just have like that little bit of connection there where, as you said, Watkins didn't have an offer from Washington High School either. Kind of one of those lower rated guys, but he's got a projectable body where you can see him in the middle of the offensive line, maybe as a center or as a guard. And especially if this is somebody that the staff is looking at and saying, hey, we kind of like what he might be as a center, a couple of years down the road. That's something where you and I have been concerned about the depth of that position for a while, where we've talked about the possibility of adding Branson Hickman from SMU as a transfer for his final season while Landon Hatchett recovers from his injury. And then Landon goes full bore in 2025. Probably don't see much of him this season. And then having somebody like Watkins behind him and, potentially bringing in somebody else as well, just reloading the depth at that position where you look at 2023. Mateo Mele goes down, Parker Brailsford is there. Parker Brailsford needs to go help out at right guard, Landon Hatchett's there. Worst case scenario, Gearin Hatchett is also there, where there were a multitude of guys who could snap the ball. I was going to say take snaps. That'd be impressive if they could snap it themselves. But having that is really important. And right now, there's one, maybe two guys, depending on how you feel about guard Memolar at center. But at the same point, he's also not going to be practicing in the spring. He's also recovering from an injury. So just getting somebody in who might be able to do that is really important.
Right, and I think that's kind of the key, right? It's pretty clear as day this spring is not going to be as optimal as next spring, right? Like Jedd Fisch, year from now, is going to be going into his second year at Washington's second spring at Washington in much better, almost basically like Kalen did. Right? It's like that first spring, it was a little bit better than what this one will be, but it wasn't great, right? It's like you have a number of guys where, okay, well, we're not really able to get a full install on the field because we're rolling with a lot of, redshirt freshmen or walk-ons or a combination of guys that we likely do not expect to start this fall. But
Right.
then but it's still important to kind of have that development for those younger guys to say, hey, you know what, this give you guys a leg up next year. Where hey, and maybe even into the fall if you really impress, because we talked about it. There's a number of redshirt freshmen where it's okay, maybe it's not ideal, but if those guys pop in Brendan Carroll's system, I mean, Parker Brailsford is kind of the highest bar to achieve, but he also showed, hey, you can if you can learn the scheme and pick it up pretty quickly, and Brendan Carroll seems to be in kind of that similar boat with Scott Huff, you can play as a redshirt
Yeah.
freshman. It might not be the prettiest, right? But I think you'd rather, if you're Jedd Fisch, take that and just build your offensive line for 2 or 3 years out, and
And
then
that's
sprinkle in transfers versus lean on them this year.
right. And that's something he said he's really comfortable with too at multiple points where he said, yeah, we're not afraid to play true freshmen, redshirt freshmen along the offensive line. But Lars, let's keep moving on here because we should talk about some of the other official visits from the summer. And I've got a fun take for you. Right after from a message from our friends over at Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Some of the coolest things about Game Time is it's so easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Again, you get a view from every single seat in the venue and their lowest price guarantee, events cancellation protection, job loss protection, all kinds of protections to help you save money, because Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users can use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, Lars, there are 2 big official visit weekends right now that have been set up. There's May 31st and there's June 21st. My take is that I believe as of right now, even though June 21st, there's more people, and it looks like that's going to be the last weekend before another dead period on the recruiting calendar, where right now the June 21st visit weekend has Anquon Fegans, Darius Afalava, who we talked about, and Aiden Matai, who we've talked about on this show, Tristan Castro, the defensive back from Upland, Julian McMahon, a running back from California that you interviewed over on Inside the Huskies, and Josiah Hammond, a defensive lineman from Oklahoma. Well, May 31st has Dijon Lee, Matai Tagoa'i, and Raiden Vines-Bright. My take is that despite the fact that June 21st is going to be the biggest weekend in terms of visitors, that right now May 31st will be far more important.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's funny because I mean, the it's not one to be a bad pick on, right? Because like
No, not at all.
you're not going for volume, you're going for talent, right? Where now
Yeah.
again, I will say we're recording this on February 22nd. Fair bet there's going to be more than 3 visitors that weekend if they're bringing in those 3 headliners. It's like anytime you're bringing on a big show, right? Anytime a concert comes to your town, okay, you're going to still kind of have in some other guys, right? It's not just going to be, hey, like this is just Garth Brooks. This is just Taylor Swift. Like, we might have some other people kind of sprinkled around there. So having just Dijon Lee and Matai Tagoa'i, and again, Raiden Vines-Bright seems like pretty not.
I think he's one of their top targets of position. They like him a lot.
No, I was gonna say I'm not sure it's already a lock. Like that's what I'm saying. I was gonna say I can see that one being in the boat already. But I'm saying of the other 2, okay, Dijon Lee probably next in line, and then Tagoa'i. So you would imagine they'd probably want to get a couple more guys, and also the way that you look at some of these other visits. If let's say because I believe Dijon Lee is visiting other schools after Washington, right? So there's
he's got Georgia on the weekend of the 14th, and then Alabama on the weekend of the 21st.
Right. So clearly, some of those visits won't happen, and that's when you look at the June 21st weekend. Okay, maybe Fegans doesn't even make that visit, right? Because he's committed to Auburn by then, right? So that's why I kind of going back to our other segment of, well, hey, these are some impressive visitors, but it's always kind of good to remember it. Instead of unlike the divorce chapter, where they kind of were like, hey, this is going to be June is going to be our month, and we're really going to put it in the last weekend in June. Whereas this staff is saying, hey, we want to make sure we're not waiting and kind of shorting ourselves and saying, dang, now we got to try and flip a Fegans because we missed out on the other two, right? Now it's okay,
Yeah.
now we got to work even harder. Where at least you're preparing for different scenarios. And I think there's probably 10 more visitors that'll be added to both those weekends combined, like just over the next couple of months.
Sure, yeah. And I think one big thing to keep in mind that you and I have both heard is when we look at that big June weekend from last year, where some of the other names that didn't end up taking that trip, like Santana Wilson, like Kingston Lopa, who committed to Texas and Oregon respectively, where they were never going to be able to take all of those guys, and they weren't going to be able to host all of those guys at one time either.
Right.
And that's something we've heard from some pretty reliable sources. And you look at that and you say, Jedd Fisch said, yeah, we can't have something like that happen, because I know that this last staff really liked Kingston Lopa, but they weren't able to get him on campus. And then once he committed to Oregon, that was just kind of it. So they're saying, all right, Dijon Lee, where, yeah, they really wanted him to come in on that last weekend in June, where that would have been really big. And, that would have been a really nice time for them to just close the deal with him and just say, all right, we know you want to commit soon. We're your last visit. We got this last chance to make a great impression. But when you look at having a lot of these big targets visiting earlier on, it gives you a chance to lock it down right then and there. And, maybe they'll still take a visit or two after, but if you're able to make a strong enough impression because you trust that once you get guys on campus, you're going to be able to make an impression that might be better than what some of these other schools have to offer for one reason or another, you just have to make sure that you find a way to do that.
Right, and I think that's kind of why you target a number of different guys with different, reasons for choosing Washington, right? Where if you look at Fegans, okay, a guy from Alabama, is it likely? But hey, if he has interest, like you still want him on campus, right? You still want to at least make the effort to say, and again, there's kids that set visits all the time and then commit, 2 or 3 weeks later. So it's not a guarantee even. But the point is, you want to still be in that contention, right? Because what we're talking about here is also long term. Where let's say Fegans goes to Auburn or Alabama or whatever, and maybe it doesn't work a couple of years down the line, and John Richardson's still at Washington or whatever, and then you still have those relationships. Say, hey, you know what? Okay, it didn't work out here. Now you're coming here with a no contact designation because okay, I should have gone there, right? Like that's something to where you at least you don't want to just be thinking, okay, well, because you're probably going to Auburn, so maybe it's not worth getting in for a visit. We'll contact you, we'll reach out to you, but like we're not going to really invest in you. It's like, well,
Sure.
no, you still want to make the effort because you never know when it's going to come back to help you. And I think that is another sign of Jedd Fisch knowing, hey, like just get these kids on campus and see what happens. And that first step to getting on campus, it starts with scheduling that visit. Now, whether you get there or not, different story. But the point is, at least you're on that track.
You're right, and then that all comes back to somebody like Dijon Lee, where you look at, oh yeah, he's set for the 21st, had to cancel because of prior engagements with Alabama, however it was that worked out. But the next day, it's all right. Yeah, I'm going May 31st. It didn't take long where they said, all right, we're not. Obviously he wanted to come up and take that visit, but Fisch's staff understood we need to make sure that this happens because of not only the caliber of player and where he might be on our board, but this is just an important player to get on campus no matter what. And, maybe we see that just kind of trickle down where who knows how many other top 100 prospects from the 247 board might take an official visit to Washington over the summer. But, let's say they do get Dijon Lee. How does that impact going forward the next class where it's, Dijon Lee came in, played, had success? Or that's what Jedd Fisch's plan is he knows if you can get these guys in there, you can play them early, that more people are going to want to do that. And you can build a top tier roster that can compete in 2026, 2027 when, you're going to have some high impact freshmen, but you're also these freshmen that you sign and you played in 2024 and 2025 are going to be the leaders of your team at this point.
Right, exactly. And also, what's to say Dijon Lee doesn't decide to commit to Washington on that May visit and say, you know what, I'm not visiting Auburn and Alabama. I can set those visits, but it doesn't mean I have to take them. And
Sure.
The fact that, to your point, that he rescheduled that visit rather quickly, it didn't take more than 24 hours, tells me, okay, well, maybe I'll just move on my commitment earlier, and then maybe I'll come back on an unofficial visit on the 21st to help recruit some other guys, and being a West Coast kid, that's not out of the realm of possibility, right? So
Right.
there's a number of ways where it can work where, hey, and also getting Dijon Lee before then, let's say Washington gets the last visit, but then he's already been wowed by Alabama. He's already been wowed by Auburn. He's already been wowed by some of these other schools. And it's like, now Washington's really got to, okay, this is the one where it's got to live up to all these other visits. I think the fact that Dijon prioritized Washington before the other two to get on campus before those visits tells me where his head's at.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And then you kind of say the same thing about Tagoa'i, right? Where we'll see what he does with the other visits that he's allotted. I know it's unlimited now, but still feels like most kids are trying to look at it in the mold of they'll take 4, they might take 5, and some might even commit before then. But it's really interesting to see the way the staff is recruiting. And it's just such a switch up from what we saw under Kalen DeBoer, where we know that strategy worked in its own way. And now this one is going after more of those high end where that's their strategy. We're getting a John Richardson, a Kevin Cummings, some of these guys who aren't afraid to go do that, and some who might have a little bit more experience doing that, where we know Jamarcus Shepard was a good recruiter here. He was a good recruiter at Purdue, but there wasn't, outside of, also Scott Huff, a long history of elite recruiters on staff. So having a staff with a couple more of those guys it's interesting to see the differences between Jedd Fisch and Kalen DeBoer. And it's not saying that one is better than the other, but it just looks like one of them is coming from a more sustainable approach in a certain way.
And certainly from a long-term perspective, yeah, right? Because, you could say Kalen DeBoer's had sustained winning success everywhere he's been.
Absolutely.
He's won 9 games or more every place he's been, I believe. So, it's not to say that they're not winners, but one allows you to win or be in contention for a national championship once every maybe 3 to 5 years, and one is maybe more 1 to 3 years, where it's like, hey, every couple of years, once you get to the roster and the level that you want to be at, then you can be competing for championships year in and year out. Whereas, okay, if you look at Kalen DeBoer stayed, right? You had Will Rogers coming in. There was some talent on the roster, but there was nothing that was going to reload like it was last year. So you would have had to hit the portal again, do all that again, and then hope that it worked, right? And so I think one's more sustainable long term, one's more of a high risk, high reward.
Right. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We've got so many more fun interviews, just fun content coming for you over the course of the offseason. So make sure you stay tuned and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss out. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell notifications icon on YouTube so you never miss when we publish a video. Please make sure to like the video, leave us a 5-star review. If you're audio only, leave us a comment down below. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, thank you so much for tuning in. We will talk to you on Wednesday.